Hi, and welcome to the archive of history. Imagine waking in absolute darkness, in a chamber so silent that you can hear the oil lamps flickering against the painted walls. The air is heavy with the scent of frankincense and myrrh, mixed with the faint mineral smell of the stone that surrounds you. You are lying on a bed inlaid with gold and ebony, your head resting on a carved headrest that keeps your neck elevated, protecting the elaborate wig you wore the night before. Outside these walls, the Nile moves silently through the desert, and beyond that, two kingdoms stretch from the delta marshes to the granite cliffs of the first cataract. You are not merely a ruler, you are a living god. You are Pharaoh of the two lands, the lord of Upper and Lower Egypt, the son of Ra, and the mortal incarnation of Horus on earth. Tonight we journey into the most extraordinary existence in the ancient world. We will walk through the gilded halls of palaces that have turned to dust. We will stand in the shadow of monuments built to last forever. We will feel the weight of the double crown and the burden of divine responsibility. This is not a story of luxury alone, though there is unimaginable wealth. It is a story of ritual, of duty, of a life lived under the gaze of gods and men, a life where every action carries cosmic significance. Before we drift off, I am always curious to know where my listeners are tuning in from and what time it is that they are listening tonight. Let me know in the comments. And now, settle in. Let the modern world fade away and let us travel back more than 3,000 years, to the age when the desert sands were new and the pyramids stood gleaming white under an unforgiving sun. The light comes slowly to the palace.
It is not yet dawn, but already the priests are awake in the temple courtyards beyond your walls.
You hear nothing of them, of course. Your chamber is deep within the royal residence, insulated by corridors and anterooms, by layers of mud brick and limestone, by curtains of linen so fine they seem woven from light itself. But you know they are there, preparing for the first ritual of the day, a ritual that cannot begin without you. Your body is still. You have trained yourself over the years to wake without starting, without the undignified scramble of lesser men. A pharaoh does not wake like other mortals. You open your eyes slowly, and the darkness resolves into shapes. The painted frieze above you depicting the sun god red in his solar bark, the distant glow of a single lamp left burning through the night, the faint outline of the doorway where your personal servant sleeps on a mat, ready to attend you the moment you stir. You do not call out. You do not need to. The servant, a man who has attended you since your youth, has been trained to sense the change in your breathing. He rises silently, lights a second lamp from the first, and approaches with the practiced grace of someone who has performed this action 1,000 times. He does not speak. Neither do you. The early morning is a sacred time, a liminal space between the world of sleep and the world of the living, and it is treated with reverence. He brings a basin of water, warmed over coals in an adjoining room, scented with lotus oil. You sit up, swing your legs over the edge of the bed, and the coolness of the stone floor meets your bare feet. The sensation is grounding, real, a reminder that despite the titles and the divinity, you inhabit a body that feels heat and cold, hunger and fatigue. The stone beneath your feet is smooth, polished by years of footsteps, cool from the night that has just passed. You can feel the slight variations in temperature as you move from where the moonlight fell through the high window to where the shadows remained unbroken through the dark hours. This contrast, this simple tactile reality, anchors you in the physical world even as you prepare to enter the realm of the divine. The servant pours the water slowly, and steam rises from the basin, carrying with it the delicate perfume of lotus, mixed with something else, perhaps sweet almond oil or essence of cinnamon, brought from distant lands. The scent fills your nostrils and seems to clear your mind, washing away the remnants of dreams you can no longer remember. Your servant pours the water over your hands, and you wash your face, your neck, the sleep from your eyes. The water runs into a copper basin, and the servant takes it away without a word. You are not yet dressed. You are still in the simple linen kilt you wore to sleep, unadorned, almost humble. But that will change. Another servant enters, carrying the first layer of your daily costume, a fresh kilt of the finest linen, pleated so precisely that each fold catches the lamplight. You stand, and they dress you with the efficiency of ritual. The linen is soft, almost weightless, but it is only the beginning. Over this will come the ceremonial garments, the jewelry, the crowns, the false beard of kingship. But not yet. First you must purify yourself. First you must go to the temple. The palace is waking around you now, though you hear only the faintest echoes of it. Footsteps in distant corridors, the low murmur of voices, the clatter of pottery in the kitchens where the morning bread is being baked. You move through the halls escorted by your personal guard, men who walk behind you with spears and shields, their faces impassive, their loyalty absolute. They have been chosen not only for their strength, but for their silence, their discretion. They know the secrets of the palace, the comings and goings, the whispered conversations, and they will take those secrets to their graves. The walls around you are painted with scenes of triumph, you smiting enemies, offering to the gods, receiving the loyalty of foreign kings. These images are not mere decoration, they are truth made visible, reality shaped by art and repetition, until it becomes indistinguishable from fact. You have been taught since childhood that the painted image and the spoken word have power, that to depict a thing is to make it real, to speak a name is to give it life. And so the walls tell the story of your reign, over and over, until even you begin to see yourself as the murals do, eternal, victorious, beloved of the gods. You pass through the final corridor and step into the open air. The sky is still dark, but the eastern horizon glows with the faint promise of dawn. The air is cool, almost cold, a brief mercy before the sun rises and the desert heat descends. You cross a courtyard, your sandals making soft sounds on the paving stones, and ahead of you, the temple rises. It is not the great temple of Karnak or the mortuary temple that will one day house your mummified body. This is the private temple of the palace, a smaller structure, but no less sacred. Here the god resides in his shrine, and here you will perform the first duty of the day. You will wake the god. The priests are waiting for you at the temple entrance. They are dressed in white linen, their heads shaved, their bodies purified by natron and water. They bow as you approach, their foreheads nearly touching the ground, but you do not acknowledge them. Not yet. You are not here as a man. You are here as the intermediary between the divine and the mortal, the only living soul who can stand in the presence of the god and not be destroyed. The high priest steps forward, carrying a censer of burning incense. The smoke rises in thick, fragrant coils, and you breathe it in, letting it fill your lungs, purify your thoughts. You pass through the outer courtyard, then the hypostyle hall, where columns rise like a forest of stone, their capitals carved into lotus blossoms and papyrus flowers. The light here is dim, filtered through high windows, and the air is thick with the scent of incense and oil. The columns tower above you, each one massive and solid, carved from limestone or sandstone brought from quarries hundreds of miles away. Some are painted in vibrant colors, though in this pre-dawn light, the reds and blues and golds appear muted, almost ghostly. The ceiling between the column capitals is decorated with stars, golden stars against a deep blue background, representing the body of Nut, the sky goddess, who arches over the world. Your footsteps echo softly in this vast space, and you are aware of every sound, every breath, every whisper of fabric against stone. The priests who follow you maintain their respectful distance, and their chanting creates a low, rhythmic undertone that seems to emanate from the very walls themselves. You pass by offering tables that will later in the day be laden with bread and beer, with roasted fowl and cuts of meat, with fruits and vegetables brought from the palace gardens and the farms along the Nile. But now they stand empty, waiting for the god to wake before they can receive their daily gifts. The floor beneath your feet is worn smooth by countless generations of priests and kings who have walked this same path, performing these same rituals, maintaining the eternal cycle of worship that keeps the cosmos in balance. You think briefly of all those who came before you, of the pharaohs whose names are carved in the king lists, whose statues line the temple precincts, whose voices once echoed in these very halls. They are dust now, their bodies mummified and entombed, but their castes still dwell in these sacred spaces, still receive offerings, still participate in the eternal life of the gods. At the far end of the hall, a doorway leads to the inner sanctuary. Only you and the high priest may enter here. The others remain behind, chanting in low voices, their words echoing off the stone. You step through the doorway, and the world contracts to this single small room. In the center, on a pedestal of granite, stands the shrine. It is sealed with a clay seal, marked with your cartouche, your name in hieroglyphs enclosed in the oval that symbolizes eternity. You break the seal with your own hands. This is not a task you can delegate. The god sleeps within, and only the king can wake him. You open the doors of the shrine, and there in the darkness stands the statue of the god. It is small, perhaps the height of your forearm, carved from wood or stone, inlaid with gold and precious stones. Its eyes are wide, staring, almost alive in the flickering lamplight. You do not fear it. You have done this every morning since your coronation, and you will do it every morning until you die. But there is always a moment, just before you begin, when you feel the weight of what you are doing. You are addressing divinity. You are speaking to the force that makes the Nile flood, the sun rise, the crops grow. You are asking for favor, for Mat, for the order that holds the world together. You begin the ritual. You recite the words, ancient words that were old when your grandfather's grandfather was born. You offer bread and beer, meat and wine, the symbolic food of the gods. You anoint the statue with oil, dress it in fresh linen, adorn it with jewelry. You burn incense, and the smoke rises, carrying your prayers to the heavens. I, priest, assists you, handing you the implements, murmuring the responses, but the power of the ritual flows through you. You are the conduit. You are the axis around which the cosmos turns. When the ritual is complete, you seal the shrine again, marking it with your name, your authority. The god is awake. The day can begin. You turn and walk back through the temple, through the hall of columns, through the courtyard, and into the growing light of dawn. The sun is rising now, and with it, the heat. You return to the palace, and the transformation begins. In your private chambers, the servants are waiting with the regalia of kingship. They remove the simple kilt and replace it with a more elaborate one, the pleats starched and precise. Over this, they drape a broad collar of gold and lapis lazuli, turquoise and carnelian, each bead strung and knotted by the finest craftsmen in Thebes. The weight of it settles on your shoulders, a familiar pressure. They place bracelets on your wrists, rings on your fingers, a pectoral over your chest. Each piece is not merely ornament. Each is a symbol, a statement of power, a reminder of your role. But the most important transformation is yet to come. A servant approaches, carrying the double crown on a cushion of linen. The Pachant, the crown that unites Upper and Lower Egypt. The white crown of Hedjet nested within the red crown of Deshret. It is tall, imposing, and heavier than it looks. You have worn it so many times that your neck has grown strong from the weight, but it is never comfortable. It is not meant to be. You bend slightly, and the servant places it on your head, adjusting it carefully, ensuring it sits level and secure. The room seems to shift around you. You are no longer simply a man. You are Pharaoh, the living Horus, the son of Ra, the lord of the two lands. You are the embodiment of the state, the guarantor of order, the bridge between heaven and earth. The weight of the crown is not merely physical. You learned this on the day of your coronation, a day that seems both impossibly distant and vividly present in your memory. You were young then, perhaps not yet 20, and though you had been raised to expect this moment, nothing could have prepared you for the reality of it. Your father had died, his body already in the hands of the embalmers, his organs removed and placed in canopic jars, his flesh treated with natron to preserve it for eternity. The mourning period had been long, the rituals complex and exhausting. You had walked behind his coffin to the Valley of the Kings, watched as it was lowered into the tomb, sealed behind stone and sand, and then, before the dust had settled, before you had time to grieve as a son, you were summoned to the temple for your own transformation. The coronation was held in the great temple of Amunet-Karnak, a place of such scale and grandeur that even now, after years of rule, it takes your breath away. The columns rise like the legs of giants, the walls are carved with gods and kings stretching back to the first dynasty, and the air hums with a power that is older than memory. You walked through those halls dressed in white linen, barefoot, purified by water and incense. The high priests led you to the inner sanctuary, where the god himself resided, and there, in the presence of Amun, you were anointed with sacred oil, dressed in the regalia of kingship, and crowned with the keshant. The priests recited your five-fold titulary, the 5 great names that define a pharaoh, your Horus name, your 2 ladies' name, your golden Horus name, your prenomen, and your nomen. Each name was a proclamation, a binding of your identity to the cosmos itself. You remember the sensation of the oil being poured over your head, running down your face and neck, soaking into the linen. It was warm and fragrant, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, and it seemed to penetrate not just your skin but your very soul. The high priest's hands moved with practiced precision, tracing symbols on your forehead, your chest, your hands, each gesture accompanied by words in the ancient language, words so old that even the priests did not fully understand their original meaning, but which carried power nonetheless. You felt the weight of those words settling on you like a physical presence, felt the transformation taking place, felt yourself becoming something more than human, something divine. The temple was filled with witnesses, priests and nobles, officials and scribes, foreign ambassadors and visiting dignitaries. They stood in the outer halls, unable to enter the inner sanctuary but present nonetheless, their collective gaze a reminder of the public nature of your transformation. When you emerged from the sanctuary, fully crowned and robed, they prostrated themselves before you, and the sound of their bodies hitting the stone floor echoed through the vast space like distant thunder. You stood there, looking out at the sea of bowed heads, and felt for the first time the profound isolation of kingship. You were surrounded by people, but you were utterly alone. No one could share this burden. No one could truly understand what it meant to be the living embodiment of the divine, to carry the weight of two kingdoms on your shoulders, to be responsible for maintaining the cosmic order that kept the universe from descending into chaos. But the most profound moment came when the high priest placed the crook and flail in your hands. These were the symbols of your authority, the crook representing your role as shepherd of the people, and the flail representing your power to punish and protect. They were heavy, made of wood and gold, and as you held them crossed over your chest, you felt the full weight of what you had become. You were no longer a prince. You were no longer a son. You were Pharaoh, and every decision you made, every word you spoke would echo through the two lands. The priests bowed before you, their foreheads touching the ground, and you understood that this was not reverence for you as a man, but for the office you now held, the divine role you had inherited. Since that day you have carried this burden every waking moment. The crown sits heavy on your head, not just because of its physical weight, but because of what it represents. Upper and Lower Egypt. Two kingdoms united under your rule, each with its own history, its own gods, its own people. The unification is ancient, dating back to the first Pharaoh, Nile, who joined the two lands and established the throne that you now occupy. But the unity is fragile, always requiring attention, always threatening to fracture if your hand is not firm and your judgment not wise. The white crown represents the south, the Nile Valley, the land of barley and stone. The red crown represents the north, the delta, the land of papyrus and marsh. Together they are Egypt, and you are the living embodiment of that unity. Your responsibilities are vast and varied, and they begin the moment the sun rises. After the morning temple ritual, after you have been dressed and crowned, you proceed to the audience hall, where the business of the kingdom awaits. The hall is vast, with a ceiling supported by painted columns and walls adorned with scenes of your divine kingship. At the far end, on a raised platform, sits your throne. It is made of wood and gold, inlaid with ivory and precious stones, and on its back is carved the Toi, the symbol of the two lands bound together by papyrus and lotus. You ascend the platform and take your seat, and the room falls silent. The courtiers and officials who have been waiting bow deeply, and the day's audience begins. The vizier approaches first. He is your most trusted official, the man who oversees the administration of the entire kingdom. He is responsible for the collection of taxes, the maintenance of irrigation canals, the supervision of building projects, the administration of justice. He carries with him a stack of papyrus scrolls, reports from every nome, every province, every corner of the two lands. He kneels before you and begins his report. The grain harvest in Middle Egypt has been abundant this year, he says, and the granaries are full. This is good news, a sign that the gods are pleased, that Maat is maintained. But there is also trouble. In the eastern delta, there have been incursions by Bedouin tribes, raiding villages and stealing livestock. The local governors have requested military support, and the vizier asks for your command. You consider this carefully. The Bedouin are a persistent problem. Nomads who live on the edge of the desert and the cultivated land, who respect no borders and fear no kings. They are not a threat to the kingdom itself, but they are a nuisance, and if left unchecked, they can destabilize entire regions.
You ask the vizier about the strength of the local garrisons,
About the readiness of the troops. He assures you that a detachment of soldiers can be sent within days, a show of force sufficient to drive the raiders back into the desert. You nod and give your approval. The vizier makes a note on his papyrus, and the matter is settled. This is the nature of kingship. 1,000 small decisions, each one shaping the lives of thousands of people, each one requiring wisdom, judgment, and the will to act. The audience continues throughout the morning. Officials come and go, each presenting their reports, their requests, their petitions. A delegation of merchants from Punt arrives, bearing gifts of myrrh and ivory, leopard skins and exotic woods. They prostrate themselves before you, their foreheads pressed to the floor, and present their offerings. You accept them graciously, and in return, you grant them permission to trade in the markets of Thebes and Memphis. This is diplomacy, the careful management of relationships that keep the trade routes open and the wealth flowing into Egypt. Punt is far to the south, beyond the Red Sea, a land of legend and mystery, and maintaining good relations with its rulers is essential. The merchants leave satisfied, and you make a mental note to send an expedition of your own ships to Punt within the year, to bring back more of the precious myrrh that is so essential for the temple rituals. A scribe approaches next, carrying a scroll bearing news from the north. The annual flooding of the Nile has begun, and the water is rising. This is the most important event in the Egyptian calendar, the moment when the river swells with the rains of distant lands and spreads its fertile silt across the fields. The height of the flood will determine the harvest, the wealth of the kingdom, the fate of your people. Too little water, and there will be famine. Too much, and villages will be swept away. The scribe reports that the initial rise is promising, neither too high nor too low, and that the Nilometers at Memphis and Elephantine are recording favorable levels. You feel a sense of relief. The flood is a gift from the gods, a sign of their favor, and a successful inundation means another year of stability, another year when the granaries will be full and the people fed. But even as you listen to these reports, even as you make decisions and issue decrees, you are aware that the true work of kingship is not conducted here in the audience hall. It is conducted in the temples, in the rituals that maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order that keeps the universe in balance. Ma'at is the central concept of Egyptian thought, the idea that the world is governed by a divine order, a harmony that must be constantly maintained. Chaos, is always lurking at the edges, threatening to break through, to unravel the fabric of existence. And it is your responsibility, as Pharaoh, to hold chaos at bay. This responsibility weighs on you constantly. Every morning, you wake the god in the temple. Every evening you perform the closing rituals, sealing the shrine, ensuring that the divine presence is secure. Throughout the day you make offerings, burn incense, recite prayers. You do this not because you are particularly pious, though you are, but because the survival of the world depends on it. If the rituals are not performed, if the gods are not honored, then Ma'at will weaken and chaos will creep in. The Nile will not flood, the sun will not rise, the crops will fail, and the people will suffer. This is why you are not merely a king, you are a priest, the high priest of all Egypt, the only person who can stand in the presence of the gods and speak on behalf of humanity. The priests in the temples assist you, of course. They perform many of the daily rituals, they maintain the sanctuaries, they oversee the offerings, but they do so in your name, as your representatives. The ultimate responsibility is yours, and yours alone. And this responsibility extends beyond the rituals themselves. It extends to the very fabric of society, to the maintenance of justice, to the protection of the weak, to the punishment of the wicked. You are the living embodiment of Ma'at, and your every action must reflect that principle. After the morning audience, you retire to a private chamber to meet with your closest advisors. These are men you trust, men who have proven their loyalty and their wisdom over many years. There is the chief treasurer, who oversees the royal wealth, the gold mines of Nubia, the tribute from foreign lands. There is the commander of the army, a grizzled veteran who has fought in campaigns from the Delta to the Fourth Cataract. There is the royal architect, the man responsible for the construction of your mortuary temple, the great monument that will house your mummified body and ensure your eternal existence in the afterlife. These men speak freely in your presence, offering advice, raising concerns, debating strategies. This is not the formal audience of the morning. This is the inner circle, the council where real decisions are made. Today, the discussion centers on the construction of your tomb. The royal architect unrolls a papyrus scroll, revealing a detailed plan of the structure. It will be located in the Valley of the Kings, a desolate wadi on the west bank of the Nile, hidden among barren cliffs. The location has been chosen for its secrecy and its symbolism. The west is the land of the dead, the place where the sun sets, where the soul journeys after death. Your tomb will be cut deep into the rock, a series of corridors and chambers descending into the earth. The walls will be painted with scenes from the Book of the Dead, the spells and incantations that will guide you through the dangers of the underworld and into the presence of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The Valley of the Kings is a harsh and unforgiving place, a landscape of limestone cliffs that glow white in the merciless sun, of narrow ravines that channel the rare flash floods with devastating force, of rock strata that shift and crack under the pressure of millennia. When you visit the site, riding in a sedan chair carried by strong men who navigate the rough path with practiced skill, you are always struck by the otherworldly quality of the place. It feels removed from the living world, a threshold between existence and oblivion. The air shimmers with heat, and the silence is profound, broken only by the distant sound of chisels striking stone, the rhythmic percussion of the work that continues day after day, year after year. The entrance to your tomb is modest, deliberately so. A rectangular opening cut into the base of a cliff face, designed to be inconspicuous once the work is complete and the entrance sealed and hidden beneath rubble and sand. But beyond that unassuming doorway lies a marvel of engineering and artistry. The first corridor descends at a steep angle, its walls already covered with protective spells and images of protective deities. The corridor is just wide enough for two men to walk abreast, and the ceiling is low enough that you must duck your head in places. The air inside is cooler than outside, but it carries the dust of excavation, the smell of limestone powder, the acrid scent of the oil lamps that burn continuously to provide light for the workers. As you descend deeper, you pass through antechambers and side rooms, each one with a specific purpose. There will be rooms for storing canopic jars containing your preserved organs, rooms for holding the Shabti figures that will serve you in the afterlife, rooms filled with furniture and clothing and jewelry, everything you will need in your eternal existence. The main burial chamber is at the very deepest point, a large rectangular room with a vaulted ceiling painted to resemble the night sky, complete with constellations and the figure of Nut, the sky goddess, stretching across the expanse. In the center of this chamber, a massive granite sarcophagus waits, still being carved and polished by skilled craftsmen who work with infinite patience, knowing that any flaw, any imperfection, could threaten the safety of your eternal body. The walls of the burial chamber are being painted with the most important scenes from your journey through the underworld. You see artists perched on wooden scaffolding, their brushes moving with delicate precision as they apply pigments mixed from minerals and plants, red ochre from iron oxide, yellow from orpiment, blue from ground lapis lazuli, brought from the distant mountains of Afghanistan, green from malachite, black from charcoal and soot. These colors will remain vibrant for thousands of years, sealed in the darkness, waiting for the day when you will lie here and your eyes, transformed by the opening of the mouth ceremony, will gaze upon these sacred images and draw strength from them. The architect explains that the work is progressing well. Dozens of workers are laboring in the valley, cutting and hauling stone, painting and carving. But there are challenges. The rock is harder than expected in some places, and progress is slow. The architect requests additional resources, more workers, more tools, more time. You listen carefully, weighing his words. The tomb is perhaps the most important project of your reign. It is not merely a burial place. It is a machine, a carefully designed structure intended to ensure your eternal survival. If the tomb is not completed, if the rituals are not performed correctly, if the spells are not inscribed on the walls, then your soul will be lost in the darkness, wandering forever, unable to reach the field of reeds, the paradise where the blessed dead reside. You grant the architect's request. You order the chief treasurer to allocate additional funds, to hire more workers, to purchase more tools. The commander of the army offers to assign a detachment of soldiers to guard the site, to ensure that no tomb robbers can penetrate the valley while the work is in progress. You accept his offer, knowing that tomb robbery is a constant threat, a desecration that has plagued Egyptian burials since the earliest dynasties. The meeting continues for hours, discussing the details of the construction, the placement of the sarcophagus, the arrangement of the burial goods. By the time it ends, the sun is high in the sky, and the heat is oppressive. You retire to your private quarters for the midday meal. The palace is quiet during this time, the heat too intense for much activity. You eat in a small chamber overlooking a garden, a green oasis of palms and sycamores, flowers and fountains. The meal is simple by royal standards: bread and beer, roasted duck and vegetables, figs and dates. You eat slowly, savoring the food, allowing your mind to rest. This is one of the few moments in the day when you are truly alone, when you can set aside the crown and the crook and the flail, when you can simply exist as a man, not a god. But even here, in this quiet chamber, you are not entirely free. Beyond the garden walls, the kingdom continues to turn. Scribes are recording the day's transactions in the granaries and workshops. Priests are performing the midday rituals in the temples. Soldiers are drilling in the barracks, preparing for the next campaign. Farmers are working in the fields, tending the crops that will feed the two lands. And over all of this, over the scribes and priests and soldiers and farmers, you preside. Your authority is absolute. Your word is law, and yet you are also bound by tradition, by ritual, by the expectations of gods and men. After the meal, you rest briefly, lying on a couch in a darkened chamber, allowing the heat of the day to pass. You do not sleep deeply. You never do. There is always too much to think about, too many concerns, too many responsibilities. But you close your eyes and let your mind drift, and for a short while you are not Pharaoh. You are simply a man, resting in the heat of an Egyptian afternoon. As you rest, your thoughts turn to the river, the lifeblood of Egypt, the source of all prosperity and power. The Nile is more than just a waterway. It is a god, Hape, the bringer of fertility and abundance. Without the Nile, Egypt would be nothing but desert, an endless expanse of sand and rock stretching from horizon to horizon. But the river creates a narrow ribbon of green, a corridor of life that runs from the delta in the north to the cataracts in the south. Everything in Egypt depends on the river: the crops that feed the people, the fish that supplement their diet, the papyrus reeds that provide material for writing and building, the transportation routes that connect the kingdom. The annual flooding of the Nile is the central event in the Egyptian calendar, the moment when the river rises and spreads its waters across the floodplain, depositing a layer of rich black silt that renews the fertility of the soil. This flooding is caused by rains that fall thousands of miles to the south, in lands that no Egyptian has ever seen, in the highlands of Ethiopia and the lakes of Central Africa. The water travels down the river for months, swelling its volume, until finally it reaches Egypt in the season of Aket, the time of inundation. The rising of the waters is monitored carefully by nilometers, stone structures with marked steps or columns that measure the height of the flood. Too low a flood means famine, for there will not be enough water to irrigate the fields. Too high a flood means destruction, for villages will be swept away and the dikes and canals will be breached. You think about the farmers who work the land, the backbone of Egyptian society, the men and women who till the soil and plant the seeds and harvest the grain that fills the royal granaries. Their lives are governed by the rhythm of the river, by the 3 seasons of the Egyptian year: Aket, the season of inundation, when the fields are flooded and no work can be done; Peret, the season of growth when the waters recede and the planting begins; and Shemu, the season of harvest when the grain is cut and gathered, and the cycle begins again. These farmers are not slaves, but neither are they free in the modern sense. They are bound to the land, obligated to pay taxes in the form of grain and labor, conscripted for public works projects when their fields lie fallow. The grain they produce is the wealth of Egypt, more valuable even than gold, for it can be eaten, it can be stored, it can be traded. The royal granaries hold vast quantities of wheat and barley, enough to feed the kingdom for years even in times of drought. This stored grain is a source of power, allowing you to feed your armies, to pay your workers, to support the priests and officials who serve the state. It is also a form of insurance, a hedge against the uncertainties of the natural world, and it is your responsibility, as Pharaoh, to ensure that the granaries are full, that the irrigation systems are maintained, that the farmers are protected from bandits and foreign raiders. The management of agriculture is a complex undertaking, requiring a vast bureaucracy of scribes and overseers, surveyors and tax collectors. After the flood recedes each year, the scribes go out into the fields to measure the land and assess the damage. They use ropes and measuring rods to calculate the area of each plot, and they estimate the expected yield based on the height of the flood and the quality of the soil. This assessment determines the tax that each farmer must pay, and it is recorded on papyrus scrolls that are stored in the archives of the provincial capitals and the central government in the palace. The system is efficient, but it is also rigid, and there is little room for compassion. A farmer who cannot pay his taxes may lose his land or be forced into labor service or even be beaten by the tax collectors who enforce the will of the state. You are aware of these hardships, and they trouble you. You know that the system can be harsh, that the burden of taxation falls heavily on those who can least afford it. But you also know that without this system, without the discipline and order it imposes, the kingdom would collapse into chaos. The irrigation canals would silt up, the dikes would breach, the fields would return to desert, and so you accept the necessity of the system, even as you try, when possible, to temper its severity. You issue decrees remitting taxes in years of poor harvest. You order the distribution of grain from the royal granaries to regions struck by famine. You punish officials who are excessively cruel or corrupt. These are small mercies, perhaps, but they are what you can offer, the limited compassion of a ruler who must balance justice with the demands of power. As the sun begins its descent, you rise and prepare for the evening audience. This is a more informal affair than the morning session, often attended by foreign ambassadors, by visiting dignitaries, by the kings of vassal states who have come to pay tribute and renew their oaths of loyalty. Tonight there is an ambassador from the Hittite king, a tall man with a thick beard, dressed in the wool robes of his people. He brings gifts, bronze weapons, silver vessels, fine textiles. He kneels before you and speaks through an interpreter, offering the greetings of his king, pledging friendship and alliance. You accept his gifts and respond with courtesy, promising to send your own gifts in return to maintain the peace that has been so carefully negotiated over the years. The Hittites are a powerful people, rulers of a vast empire in Anatolia, and they are both allies and rivals. There have been wars in the past, brutal campaigns fought in the deserts of Syria, and there will likely be wars in the future. But for now, there is peace, and you are content to maintain it. The ambassador departs, and you turn your attention to other matters. A delegation of Nubian chiefs arrives, bearing gold and ivory, ebony and leopard skins. They prostrate themselves before you, pledging their loyalty, and you grant them your favor, allowing them to trade in the markets of Thebes. This is the rhythm of diplomacy, the endless cycle of gifts and pledges, alliances and treaties, the careful management of relationships that keep the kingdom secure and prosperous. As the evening deepens, you return to the temple for the final ritual of the day. The sun is setting, and the sky is painted in shades of orange and crimson. The priests are waiting, and you perform the closing ceremony, sealing the god in his shrine, reciting the prayers that will protect him through the night. The ritual is shorter than the morning ceremony, but no less important. The night is a time of danger, when the forces of chaos are strongest, when the serpent Apophis threatens to devour the sun and plunge the world into eternal darkness. It is your duty to ensure that the sun will rise again, that the cycle will continue, that Ma'at will be maintained. When the ritual is complete, you return to the palace, but your duties are not yet finished. You are summoned to the chamber where the royal correspondence is kept, where scribes work by lamplight translating and copying the letters that arrive from foreign kings and governors. Egypt does not exist in isolation. It is part of a complex network of international relations, a web of alliances and rivalries that stretches across the known world. To the northeast lie the great kingdoms of the Near East, the Hittites in Anatolia, the Mitanni in northern Mesopotamia, the Babylonians in the south, the Assyrians further east. To the west are the Libyans, tribal peoples who periodically raid the delta. To the south lies Nubia, sometimes conquered and ruled as Egyptian territory, sometimes independent and hostile. And scattered throughout the Levant are dozens of smaller city-states, some loyal to Egypt, some to the Hittites, some playing both sides against each other. Managing these relationships requires constant attention and diplomatic skill. The language of international diplomacy in this era is Akkadian, written in cuneiform script on clay tablets. Your scribes are trained in this foreign writing system, and they translate the letters for you, explaining the nuances and implications of each message. Tonight there is a letter from the king of Babylon, a fellow great king, addressing you as brother, a term of respect between equals. He writes to congratulate you on a recent military victory and to request a gift of gold, phrasing the request as a favor between friends, but making clear that the maintenance of good relations depends on Egyptian generosity. You dictate your response carefully, striking a balance between magnanimity and firmness. You agree to send a gift of gold, but you make it clear that this is a gesture of goodwill, not an obligation, and you expect reciprocal gifts and support in return. The scribe records your words on a papyrus scroll, and it will be translated into Akkadian and inscribed on a clay tablet, then sent north by messenger, a journey that will take weeks or even months. This is the slow pace of ancient diplomacy, where messages travel at the speed of a walking man or a sailing ship, where responses can take months to arrive, where misunderstandings can fester into conflicts before they can be resolved. There is also a letter from one of your vassal kings in Canaan, a ruler of a small city-state who owes you tribute and military support. His letter is anxious and deferential, addressing you with elaborate titles and expressions of loyalty. He reports that a neighboring city has been attacking his territory, and he pleads for Egyptian military assistance, warning that if help does not come soon, he may be forced to submit to the Hittites. This is a delicate situation. If you send troops, you may be drawn into a wider conflict with the Hittites. If you do not, you risk losing a valuable ally and demonstrating weakness to other vassal states. You consider the matter carefully, consulting with your advisors. The commander of the army argues for a show of force, for sending a detachment of troops to reinforce the vassal king and demonstrate Egyptian power. The vizier counsels caution, suggesting that a diplomatic solution might be preferable, perhaps offering to mediate the dispute between the two city-states. You weigh these options, thinking about the broader strategic implications, about the state of your relationship with the Hittites, about the resources available for foreign intervention. Finally, you make your decision. You will send a small force of chariots and archers, enough to defend the vassal king's territory, but not enough to provoke a major war. And you will send a letter to the Hittite king, informing him of your action and making clear that you expect him to restrain his own vassals. This is the nature of international relations in the late Bronze Age, a constant jockeying for position, a careful calibration of force and diplomacy, a game played with lives and kingdoms. You are not merely the ruler of Egypt. You are a player on a world stage, engaged in a complex dance with other great powers, all of whom are seeking to expand their influence, to secure their borders, to accumulate wealth and prestige. And beneath the polite language of diplomatic correspondence lies the ever-present threat of war, the knowledge that these relationships can dissolve in an instant, that today's ally can become tomorrow's enemy. The correspondence continues late into the night. There are letters from governors of Egyptian provinces, reporting on tax collection and public works projects, on floods and droughts, on crimes and punishments. There are letters from trading partners, from the merchants of Cyprus and Crete, from the seafaring peoples of the Aegean, requesting permission to trade in Egyptian ports, offering exotic goods in exchange for Egyptian grain and gold. There are letters from foreign brides, princesses sent to marry you as part of diplomatic alliances, women who live in your palace, but whom you rarely see, who write to their fathers in distant lands, expressing homesickness and requesting gifts and reassurance. You read each letter, or rather, you listen as the scribes read them to you and translate them into Egyptian. You dictate responses, making decisions that will affect the lives of thousands of people, that will shape the course of events across the entire known world. This is another aspect of kingship that few understand: the endless bureaucracy, the constant flow of information and requests and problems that must be addressed. You are not merely a warrior and priest and ceremonial figurehead. You are also an administrator, a manager of a vast and complex state, a decision-maker who must process information and render judgment on matters great and small. By the time you finish with the correspondence, it is late, and you are exhausted. But there is still one more duty before you can rest. You must visit the Queen. The halls are lit with oil lamps, casting flickering shadows on the painted walls. You are tired, the weight of the day settling on your shoulders like the weight of the crown. But there is one more duty before you can rest. You must visit the Queen, the great royal wife, the woman who shares your throne and your bed, the mother of your children, the future of the dynasty. The Queen's chambers are in a separate wing of the palace, a series of rooms decorated with the finest furnishings and the most exquisite art. You pass through the corridors, escorted by your guards, and arrive at her door. The attendants announce your presence, and you are admitted into her private sitting room. She is waiting for you, dressed in a gown of fine linen, adorned with gold and jewels, her hair styled in an elaborate wig. her eyes lined with kohl. She rises as you enter and bows, a gesture of respect, though she is no ordinary woman. She is the great royal wife, the highest-ranking woman in the kingdom, the one who will bear the next Pharaoh. You have been married to her since your coronation, a union arranged by the priests and advisors to ensure the stability of the succession. She is your half-sister, a common practice among the royal family, intended to keep the bloodline pure and the divine essence concentrated. You have other wives, of course, women from noble families, women from foreign kingdoms, women given to you as gifts or taken as prizes of war. But she is the chief among them, the one whose children will inherit the throne. You have learned to respect her, even to care for her, though the relationship is as much political as personal. She is intelligent and capable, a skilled manager of the royal household, and she has borne you 2 sons and a daughter, all healthy, all strong. You sit with her for a while, discussing the affairs of the day, the news from the court, the health of the children. She tells you that your eldest son, the heir, has been studying with the royal tutors, learning to read and write, learning the texts that will prepare him for kingship. She is proud of him, and you can hear the hope in her voice, the belief that he will one day be a great pharaoh, perhaps even greater than you. You listen, nodding, offering words of encouragement, but in your heart, there is a shadow of doubt. You know how fragile life is, how quickly a healthy child can sicken and die, how uncertain the future is.
You have seen it happen before, to your own siblings,
to the children of other kings, and you know that the succession is never secure, that there are always rivals, always factions, always threats. But you do not speak of these fears. You are Pharaoh, and a pharaoh does not show weakness, not even to his wife. You spend a short time with her, and then you take your leave, returning to your own chambers. The night is fully dark now, and the palace is quiet. The servants have retired, the guards are at their posts, and the kingdom sleeps, but you do not sleep yet. You stand on the balcony of your chamber, looking out over the city. Below, the streets are dark, the houses silent. Beyond the city, the Nile glimmers in the moonlight, a silver ribbon cutting through the desert, and beyond the river, on the west bank, you can see the faint outline of the mortuary temples and tombs, the monuments of the dead, the eternal homes of your ancestors. The palace itself is a city within a city, a vast complex that houses not just you and your family, but hundreds of people who serve the royal household. There are the high officials, the vizier and the treasurer and the commander of the army, each with their own apartments and retinues. There are the priests who maintain the palace chapels and perform the daily rituals. There are the scribes who record everything that happens, who maintain the archives and libraries, who handle the endless flow of correspondence and documentation that keeps the state functioning. There are the craftsmen and artisans, the goldsmiths and jewelers, the painters and sculptors who create the objects that fill the palace and adorn your person. And then there are the servants, the vast army of anonymous workers who perform the countless tasks necessary to maintain the royal residence. There are the cooks who prepare the meals in the kitchens, working over open fires and clay ovens, baking bread and roasting meat, preparing the elaborate dishes that appear at the royal table. There are the cleaners who sweep the floors and wash the walls, who empty the chamber pots and tend the gardens. There are the launderers who wash the mountains of linen that the palace consumes, who beat the cloth on stones by the river, who bleach it in the sun and fold it into perfect stacks. There are the water carriers who bring fresh water from the Nile in clay jars balanced on their shoulders, making trip after trip in the heat of the day. These servants are mostly invisible to you. You pass them in the corridors and courtyards, but you do not really see them. They bow and prostrate themselves. They press their faces to the floor as you approach, and they remain frozen in that position until you have passed. They are forbidden to speak to you, unless spoken to first, forbidden to look you in the eye, forbidden to touch you or come within a certain distance unless specifically commanded to do so. This distance, this separation, is maintained not out of cruelty but out of the belief that you are divine, that your person is sacred, that casual contact with mortals would diminish your godhood. But you are aware of them nonetheless, aware of the vast apparatus of human labor that supports your existence. You know that when you call for water, someone has carried it from the river. When you put on fresh linen, someone has washed and pressed it. When you eat bread, someone has ground the grain and kneaded the dough and baked it in an oven. Your life of ease and luxury is built on the backs of these invisible workers, and you carry a dim awareness of this, a knowledge that your divine kingship is sustained by very human effort. The palace also houses a large number of women, the royal harem, though this term carries connotations that are not entirely accurate. The harem is not primarily a place of sensual pleasure, though that is part of its function. It is rather a separate household within the palace where the royal women live, your wives, both the great royal wife and the secondary wives, your daughters, your sisters, your mother, if she is still living, and various other female relatives and attendants. These women have their own quarters, their own servants, their own routines. They are educated and cultured, skilled in music and poetry, in weaving and embroidery, in the management of households. Some of them wield considerable political influence, particularly your mother and your chief wife, who serve as advisors and intermediaries, who manage their own estates and control their own wealth. The women of the harem live lives that are both privileged and constrained. They have access to luxury that most Egyptians can scarcely imagine: fine clothing and jewelry, elaborate cosmetics, perfumes and oils, servants to attend to their every need. But they are also isolated, confined to their quarters, rarely allowed to leave the palace, their lives defined entirely by their relationship to you. For the secondary wives, particularly those who are foreign princesses sent as part of diplomatic alliances, this isolation can be profound. They are far from their homelands, unable to speak the language fluently, caught between cultures, living in a gilded cage. You think about these women sometimes, particularly late at night when sleep eludes you. You think about the great royal wife who shares your throne but not truly your life, who performs her ceremonial duties but remains in many ways a stranger to you. You think about the daughters you have fathered, some of whom you barely know, who are being raised in the harem to become wives of nobles or foreign kings, political tools to cement alliances and extend Egyptian influence. You think about your own mother, who wielded such power when you were young, who guided you through the early years of your reign but who has now faded into the background, her influence waning as you have grown into your role. The relationships within the royal family are complex and often fraught with tension. There is always the question of succession, of which son will inherit the throne. Ideally it should be your eldest son by the great royal wife, but Egyptian succession is not always straightforward. There have been cases where younger sons have seized power, where wives have ruled as regents for infant kings, where ambitious officials have usurped the throne entirely. You are acutely aware of these possibilities, and you watch your sons carefully, assessing their strengths and weaknesses, trying to determine who among them has the qualities necessary to rule. Your eldest son is intelligent and dutiful, a promising young man who has been educated in all the arts of kingship. You have taken him with you to military campaigns, have allowed him to participate in state rituals, have gradually introduced him to the responsibilities he will one day inherit. But you also see his weaknesses, a tendency toward arrogance, a lack of patience with the tedious details of administration, a preference for the glamour of warfare over the grind of governance. You worry about whether he will be able to maintain the delicate balance of power that keeps Egypt stable, whether he will be strong enough to face the threats that loom on the horizon. Your younger sons are less certain quantities. Some show promise, others seem content to live lives of luxury without ambition. And then there are your daughters, who in Egyptian tradition can sometimes inherit the throne if no suitable male heir is available, though this is rare and often leads to instability. You think about all of this constantly, turning it over in your mind, making calculations, trying to secure the succession, trying to ensure that when you die, the transition will be smooth, that civil war will not tear the kingdom apart. The palace is also a place of intrigue and faction. The high officials compete with each other for your favor, for positions of influence, for lucrative appointments. They form alliances. They engage in subtle campaigns of gossip and rumor. They undermine their rivals while presenting faces of loyalty and devotion to you. You are aware of these machinations, and you use them to your advantage, playing one faction against another, ensuring that no single official becomes too powerful, that no coalition can threaten your authority. This is another skill of kingship that you have learned over the years, the ability to read people, to understand their motivations, to manipulate them without appearing to do so. There are spies in the palace, of course, not official agents but servants and attendants who report to various officials, who carry gossip and information, who watch and listen and remember. You have your own network of informants, people who are loyal to you personally, who bring you information about what is being said and done in the corners of the palace where you cannot go. This intelligence is essential, for the palace is a place where secrets are currency, where knowledge is power, where a whispered conversation in a dark corridor can have consequences that ripple through the kingdom. And yet, for all its complexity and intrigue, the palace is also your home, the only place where you can occasionally relax your guard and simply exist. There are moments, rare and precious, when you can sit in your private garden, listening to the fountain, watching the fish swim in the pool, feeling the cool evening breeze on your face. There are moments when you can play a game of senet with a trusted advisor, moving the pieces across the board, engaging in the simple pleasure of strategy and competition. There are moments when you can listen to music, to the sweet sound of the harp and the flute, to the voice of a singer performing an ancient hymn. These moments are fleeting, always interrupted by the demands of kingship, by the arrival of a messenger with urgent news, by the need to attend to yet another ritual or audience or consultation. But they are precious nonetheless. Reminders that beneath the crown and the collar, beneath the titles and the divine mandate, you are still human, still capable of experiencing beauty and pleasure, still yearning, sometimes, for a life less burdened by responsibility and power. You think about them often, those who came before you. You think about your father, lying in his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, his body preserved, his soul journeying through the underworld. You think about the great pharaohs of the past, Khufu and Khafre, who built the pyramids at Giza, monuments so immense that they still dominate the landscape. You think about Thutmose III, the warrior king, who expanded the empire to its greatest extent, conquering Syria and Nubia, bringing tribute and wealth flooding into Egypt. And you think about Akhenaten, the heretic king, who abandoned the old gods and worshipped only the sun disk, Aten, who moved the capital to a new city in the desert and nearly destroyed the kingdom in his zealotry. Each of these men left their mark on history, and you wonder what your own legacy will be. Will you be remembered as a great warrior, a conqueror of nations, or as a wise administrator, a builder of monuments, a maintainer of mart, or will you be forgotten, your name erased from the king lists, your monuments usurped by your successors? These are the thoughts that haunt you in the quiet moments, the questions that have no easy answers. You are Pharaoh, and you are immortal in the eyes of your people. But you are also a man, and you know that your time is finite, that one day you too will make the journey to the west, and another will sit on your throne. You turn away from the balcony, and return to your chamber. The servants have prepared your bed, and you lie down, removing the crown and setting it on a stand beside you. The weight lifts from your head, and for a moment you feel almost light, almost free. But the burden of kingship does not rest with the crown. It is carried in the mind, in the heart, in the soul. And as you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, you know that tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. You will wake the god, you will don the crown, you will sit on the throne, and you will rule the two lands. This is your fate, your destiny, your divine purpose, and you will fulfill it, as your fathers did before you, as your sons will do after you, until the end of time. The seasons turn, and the rhythm of your life continues. The Nile floods and recedes. The crops are planted and harvested, and the cycle of festivals and rituals marks the passage of time. You preside over the Opet festival, a grand celebration held in Thebes during the season of inundation. It is one of the most important festivals in the Egyptian calendar, a time when the statue of Amun is carried in a great procession from the temple of Karnak to the temple of Luxor, accompanied by priests and musicians, by dancers and acrobats, by the people of Thebes who line the streets to witness the divine spectacle. You walk at the head of the procession, dressed in your finest regalia, the double crown on your head, the crook and flail in your hands. The sun beats down on you, relentless and fierce, and the sweat runs down your back beneath the heavy collar and the linen robes. But you do not falter. This is your duty, your role in the cosmic drama. The people watch you with reverence, their faces filled with awe and devotion. To them you are not a man. You are a god, the living incarnation of Horus, the son of Osiris, the guarantor of their safety and prosperity. And you must play the part, must embody the divine, must never let them see the exhaustion, the doubt, the humanity beneath the mask. The procession takes hours, winding through the streets of Thebes, past the houses and workshops, past the markets and docks, until finally it reaches the temple of Luxor, The statue of Ammon is carried into the inner sanctuary, and you perform the sacred rituals, offering food and drink, burning incense, reciting the ancient prayers. The festival continues for days, with feasting and music, with rituals and offerings, and throughout it all, you are the center, the focus, the living bridge between heaven and earth. But there is another festival, one that comes only rarely, one that is perhaps the most important and terrifying ritual of your entire reign. It is called the Sed Festival, the Heb Sed, a ceremony of renewal that takes place after you have ruled for 30 years. Some pharaohs never live long enough to celebrate it. Others, those who are particularly long-lived, may celebrate it multiple times in their later years. But whenever it occurs, it is a momentous occasion, a ritual designed to rejuvenate your power, to prove your continued fitness to rule, to renew your divine mandate. You have now reigned for 30 years, and the time has come for your Sed festival. The preparations have been underway for months, involving priests and craftsmen from throughout the kingdom. A special ritual complex has been constructed at Memphis, the ancient capital, a series of shrines and courts designed specifically for the ceremony. The festival will last for several days, and it will involve rituals of incredible complexity and antiquity, some of them so old that even the priests are not entirely certain of their original meaning. The central ritual of the Sed festival is a race. You must run a ceremonial course, demonstrating your physical vigor and your ability to continue ruling. This is not a test in the modern sense, for you cannot truly fail, but it is a symbolic demonstration, a performance that must be executed with dignity and strength. The course is marked out in the ritual complex, a rectangular path that you must traverse 4 times, once for each cardinal direction, once for Upper Egypt and once for Lower Egypt, twice more to complete the cosmic circuit. On the day of the race, you are dressed in a special kilt, shorter and simpler than your usual ceremonial garments, allowing for freedom of movement. You hold a ritual object in each hand, the second scepter and a document case, symbols of power and knowledge. The priests and nobles gather around the course, and the entire court watches as you prepare to run. You are not a young man anymore. 30 years of rule have taken their toll, and your body aches with the effort of simply standing in the heat. But you cannot show weakness, you cannot falter. This ritual is a test of Mat, a demonstration that the cosmic order remains intact, that you remain capable of maintaining it. The signal is given, and you begin to run. Your legs feel heavy, your breath comes in gasps, and the world seems to narrow to the path ahead of you, and the pounding of your sandals on the packed earth. You run the first circuit, and then the second, and your vision begins to blur at the edges. But you continue, driven by will and necessity, by the knowledge that to stop would be to admit defeat, to suggest that the divine power has left you, that chaos threatens. You complete the 3rd circuit, and then the 4th, and finally, you cross the finish line and stand there, swaying slightly, your chest heaving, your body drenched in sweat. The crowd erupts in celebration. Priests rush forward to support you, to offer you water and wine, to assist you to a throne that has been placed nearby. You sit, and the world slowly comes back into focus. You have done it. You have completed the race. You have proven your fitness to continue ruling. The ritual continues with further ceremonies, with the offering of gifts to the gods, with the reception of tribute from foreign lands, with the renewal of oaths of loyalty from the nobles and officials. But the race is the heart of it, the moment when you demonstrate, before gods and men, that you are still Pharaoh, still the living embodiment of divine power. In the days that follow the race, you undergo further rituals of purification and renewal. You are anointed again with sacred oils, dressed in new ceremonial garments, crowned again with the double crown. It is as if you are being reborn, transformed from the aging man who completed the race into the eternal, unchanging figure of Pharaoh. The festival concludes with a great banquet, with music and dancing, with the distribution of gifts to the priests and nobles who have participated. And when it is over, when you return to Thebes and resume the ordinary business of ruling, you feel a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. You have passed through a threshold, have renewed your connection to the divine, have purchased another period of rule through your physical endurance and ritual performance. But the festival is more than just a religious ceremony. It is also a political event, a demonstration of your power and authority, a reminder to the people and the nobles and the priests that you are Pharaoh, that you are chosen by the gods, that your rule is legitimate and absolute. You are aware of the eyes watching you, the calculations being made, the ambitions lurking in the hearts of the nobles who surround you, The court is a dangerous place, filled with factions and rivalries, with plots and intrigues, and you must navigate it carefully, must balance the competing interests, must reward loyalty and punish treachery, must always be vigilant, always be one step ahead. There are moments when the mask slips, when you feel the weight of it all pressing down on you, when you long for the simple life of a common man, free from the burden of divinity, free from the endless rituals and responsibilities. But these moments are rare, and you push them aside, bury them deep. You are Pharaoh, and you have a duty to fulfill, a destiny to achieve. And so you continue, day after day, year after year, maintaining Mat, ruling the two lands, preparing for the eternal life that awaits you beyond death. The preparation for that eternal life is an obsession that grows stronger as the years pass. Your tomb in the Valley of the Kings is progressing slowly but steadily, the corridors cut deep into the rock, the chambers taking shape. You visit the site regularly, inspecting the work, consulting with the architects and artisans, ensuring that every detail is perfect. The walls are being covered with scenes from the Book of the Dead, intricate paintings that depict the journey of the soul through the underworld. There is the Hall of Judgment, where your heart will be weighed against the feather of Mat, where Anubis and Thoth will determine your fate. There is the Field of Reeds, the paradise where the blessed dead spend eternity, a place of abundance and peace, where the fields are always green and the harvests are always plentiful. The tomb is more than just a burial place. It is a house for your Ka, your spiritual double, the life force that will need sustenance and shelter in the afterlife. The burial chamber will be filled with everything you will need: furniture and clothing, food and drink, weapons and tools, servants and concubines, all represented by Shabtai figures, small statues that will come to life and serve you in the afterlife. There will be a sarcophagus of granite or quartzite, carved with protective spells, and inside it your mummified body, wrapped in linen, adorned with amulets, your face covered with a golden mask. And over it all, the lid of the sarcophagus will be sealed. The tomb will be filled with rubble and hidden, and guards will be posted to ensure that no tomb robber can ever disturb your eternal rest. But you know, deep down, that no amount of preparation can guarantee your safety in the afterlife. Tomb robbers are clever and persistent, and many of the great pharaohs of the past have had their tombs violated, their mummies desecrated, their treasures stolen. You have seen the empty tombs yourself, the smashed sarcophagi, the broken statues, and you know that the same fate could await you, that all your preparations, all your wealth, all your divine authority may not be enough to protect you from the greed of men. This fear drives you to ever more elaborate preparations. You commission the finest craftsmen in Egypt to create the most beautiful and powerful burial goods. You order the construction of a mortuary temple on the west bank of the Nile, a massive structure where offerings will be made to your Ka for all eternity, where priests will recite your name and perform the rituals that will sustain you in the afterlife. The temple is decorated with scenes of your victories, your piety, your divine lineage. It is a monument to your greatness, a statement carved in stone that will endure long after your body has turned to dust. The priests who will serve your mortuary temple are a significant consideration, for they represent a power structure that is both essential to your rule and potentially threatening to it. The priesthood of Egypt is vast and complex, a hierarchy that parallels the secular administration of the state. At the top are the high priests of the major temples, men who control enormous wealth and command the loyalty of thousands of lesser priests and temple workers. These high priests are often members of powerful noble families, men who have been appointed to their positions because of their political connections as much as their piety. The greatest of these temples is Karnak, the cult center of Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. The high priest of Amun is one of the most powerful individuals in Egypt, second only to you in terms of authority and influence. He controls the vast estates that belong to the temple, hundreds of square miles of agricultural land, entire villages whose inhabitants work the temple fields and tend the temple herds. He oversees the temple workshops where craftsmen produce goods for religious rituals and for trade. He commands the loyalty of thousands of priests, from the high-ranking prophets and lector priests down to the lowly cleaners and porters who maintain the temple complex. This concentration of power in the hands of the priesthood is both necessary and dangerous. It is necessary because the priests perform the essential rituals that maintain Mat, that keep the gods satisfied, that ensure the continued prosperity of the kingdom. Without the priests, the temples would fall silent, the gods would withdraw their favor, and chaos would descend upon the land. But it is also dangerous because the priesthood represents an alternative power center, a potential rival to the throne. There have been periods in Egyptian history when the priests of Amun grew so powerful that they effectively ruled the country, when pharaohs became puppets dancing to the priest's tune. You are constantly aware of this danger, and you work to manage it through a combination of co-option and control. You appoint men to the position of high priest who are loyal to you personally, often members of your own family or trusted officials. You make generous donations to the temples, endowing them with land and wealth, ensuring that they have an interest in maintaining the current order. You participate personally in the major festivals and rituals, demonstrating your piety and your connection to the gods, making it clear that you are not merely a secular ruler but the chief priest of Egypt, the ultimate religious authority. But you also limit the priest's power in subtle ways. You ensure that no high priest serves for too long, rotating men through the position to prevent any individual from building an independent power base. You maintain your own direct relationship with the gods through your daily temple rituals, through your role as the only person who can enter the Holy of Holies and stand in the presence of the divine. You use your control of the state bureaucracy to monitor the temple's activities, to audit their accounts, to ensure that they are not accumulating too much wealth or influence. The relationship between pharaoh and priesthood is thus one of mutual dependence and mutual suspicion. The priests need you to legitimize their authority, to provide the legal and military power that protects their estates and enforces their claims. You need the priests to maintain the religious framework that justifies your rule, to perform the rituals that keep the gods satisfied, to educate the scribes and officials who staff the bureaucracy. It is a delicate balance, one that requires constant attention and adjustment. There are different types of priests, each with their own role in the religious hierarchy. The prophets are the high-ranking priests who oversee the major temples and perform the most important rituals. The lector priests are scholars who maintain the sacred texts, who know the proper wording of spells and incantations, who can read the ancient writings that have been passed down from generation to generation. The hour priests are responsible for determining the proper times for rituals, for observing the stars and the movements of the heavenly bodies, for maintaining the sacred calendar that governs Egyptian religious life. And then there are the countless lesser priests and temple workers, the men who tend the sacred animals, who maintain the temple buildings, who prepare the offerings, who clean the floors and light the lamps. The priests live in communities attached to the temples, in quarters that are separate from the rest of the city. They are subject to strict purity regulations, required to shave their entire bodies every few days, to bathe multiple times daily in sacred pools, to abstain from certain foods and from sexual relations during their periods of service. These regulations are designed to maintain their ritual purity, to ensure that they are fit to come into contact with the divine. But they also serve to set the priests apart from ordinary society, to mark them as a special class, to emphasize their liminal position between the human and divine realms. The temples themselves are not places of public worship in the modern sense. Ordinary Egyptians do not enter the temples to pray or to participate in rituals. The temples are houses of the gods, places where the divine dwells in the form of cult statues, where the gods are fed and clothed and honored by their priestly servants. The general population participates in religion through the great festivals, when the cult statues are brought out in procession, when the gods travel from one temple to another, when the sacred mysteries are enacted in public view. These festivals are occasions of great celebration, with music and dancing, with feasting and drinking, with temporary reversal of social norms and hierarchies. But the inner workings of the temples, the daily rituals of feeding and clothing the gods, the secret ceremonies performed in the darkness of the inner sanctuaries, these remain the exclusive province of the priesthood, and of you, the pharaoh. You have been initiated into these mysteries, have been taught the secret knowledge that is passed down from ruler to ruler, the understanding of how the cosmos functions, of how the gods interact with the world, of how Mat is maintained through proper ritual action. This knowledge is power, the ultimate source of your authority, for it makes you indispensable, the one person who can bridge the gap between heaven and earth, who can speak to the gods and relay their wishes to humanity. As your health declines, as you feel death approaching, you become increasingly preoccupied with religious matters. You spend more time in the temples, participating in rituals, making offerings, consulting with the priests about the proper preparations for your death and burial. You commission new texts to be inscribed on the walls of your tomb, ensuring that you will have every possible spell and incantation to guide you through the underworld. You endow your mortuary temple with vast estates, ensuring that the priests will have the resources to maintain the offerings in perpetuity, that your name will be spoken and your kai sustained for all eternity. But even as you make these preparations, even as you seek to secure your place in the afterlife through ritual and material means, you cannot entirely escape a nagging doubt. What if it is all a mistake? What if there is no afterlife, no field of reeds, no eternal existence? What if death is simply the end, oblivion, the cessation of consciousness? These thoughts come to you unbidden, usually in the darkest hours of the night, and they fill you with a terror that you cannot acknowledge, that you must suppress and deny. For to doubt the afterlife is to doubt everything, to call into question the entire structure of meaning that has governed your life and your reign. And so you push these doubts aside, bury them deep and cling to the faith that has been instilled in you since childhood. You will die, and your body will be mummified and placed in your tomb. Your car will be sustained by offerings, and your bar will fly out each day to enjoy the sunshine and then return to the tomb each night. Your heart will be weighed in the hall of judgment, and it will be found equal to the feather of Maat. You will be welcomed into the presence of Osiris and granted eternal life in the field of reeds, where you will exist forever in a state of blessed perfection. This is what you believe, what you must believe, for without this belief your entire life has been meaningless, a brief flicker of consciousness in an uncaring cosmos. The construction of the temple is a massive undertaking, requiring thousands of workers, hundreds of tons of stone, years of labor. You oversee the work personally, visiting the site regularly, consulting with the architects, approving the designs. The temple is not just for your benefit, it is also for the benefit of the kingdom, a demonstration of your power and your devotion to the gods, a source of employment and income for the workers and craftsmen, a symbol of the prosperity and stability of your reign. The construction project reveals the staggering organizational capacity of the Egyptian state, a capacity that has been refined over thousands of years of building monuments. The work begins in the limestone quarries at Tura and Aswan, where teams of stonecutters labor under the supervision of skilled foremen. The quarrying process is itself a marvel of engineering. Workers identify the best stone, mark out the blocks with red ochre paint, and then begin the painstaking process of extraction. Copper chisels are used to cut channels around the block, and wooden wedges are driven into these channels. When water is poured over the wedges, they expand, splitting the stone along natural fault lines. Each block weighs several tons, and extracting it requires not just skill but immense physical labor. Once quarried, the stone blocks must be transported to the building site. If the quarry is near the Nile, the blocks are loaded onto barges during the flood season, when the river is high and navigable. The barges are massive wooden vessels, reinforced to handle the enormous weight, and they are towed by teams of men walking along the riverbank, their progress slow and arduous. If the quarry is inland, the blocks must be dragged overland on sledges, a process that requires even more labor. Teams of workers pull ropes attached to the sledges, and water is poured on the sand in front of the sledge to reduce friction. Archaeological evidence suggests that a single team of 172 men could move a 2.5-ton statue, giving some sense of the scale of human effort required. At the construction site, the blocks must be lifted into position, often to considerable heights. The Egyptians have developed several techniques for this. For lower courses, ramps are built of mud, brick, and rubble, allowing workers to drag the blocks up an inclined plane. For higher elevations, more complex systems of ramps or even cranes using counterweights may be employed. The exact methods are still debated by scholars, for the ancient Egyptians left few written records of their construction techniques, guarding their knowledge as a form of professional secret. But the results speak for themselves: temples and pyramids that have stood for thousands of years, monuments that still inspire awe in all who see them. The workers themselves are a diverse group. Some are skilled craftsmen, stonemasons and sculptors who have trained for years to master their craft, who can carve hieroglyphs with precision and create statues of exquisite beauty. These men are relatively well paid, receiving rations of grain and beer, housing near the construction site, and respect for their expertise. Others are unskilled laborers, farmers conscripted during the flood season when their fields lie underwater and there is no agricultural work to be done. This corvée labor is a form of taxation, an obligation that every able-bodied man owes to the state. For these workers, the conditions are harsh: long hours of back-breaking labor in the desert heat, minimal shelter, basic food. But it would be a mistake to imagine these workers as slaves, at least in most periods of Egyptian history. They are subjects of Pharaoh, fulfilling their duty to the state, and in return, they receive food and shelter, basic medical care, and the satisfaction of participating in a great and sacred project. Many of the workers' villages have been excavated by archaeologists, revealing communities with their own social structures, their own religious practices, their own lives beyond the labor they perform. At Deir el-Medina, the village that housed the workers who built the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, evidence shows a literate, relatively prosperous community with access to goods from across the Mediterranean, workers who took pride in their craft and passed their skills down through generations. The architectural legacy of Egypt's pharaohs is perhaps the most visible and enduring aspect of their civilization. Long after the political power has faded, long after the language has been forgotten and the religious beliefs abandoned, the monuments remain: the pyramids at Giza, the temples at Karnak and Luxor, the rock-cut tombs at Abu Simbel, the countless smaller temples and shrines scattered throughout the Nile Valley. These structures were built to last forever, and many of them have come close to achieving that goal, surviving thousands of years of weather and war, of earthquakes and human depredation. You think about the Old Kingdom pharaohs who built the Great Pyramids, those massive structures that dominate the Giza Plateau. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, in particular, represents an achievement that has never been surpassed in ancient Egypt. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world for over 3,000 years, a geometric perfection that still baffles engineers and architects. How did they achieve such precision, with only copper tools and human labor? How did they align the structure so accurately with the cardinal directions? How did they move and position the massive granite blocks of the inner chambers? These questions fascinate you, and you have consulted with your own architects about them, seeking to understand the methods of your ancestors so that you can apply them to your own building projects. The architects explain what they know: the use of star sightings to establish accurate north-south alignments, the employment of water-filled trenches to create level foundations, the sophisticated understanding of geometry and mathematics that allowed the builders to calculate angles and proportions. But there is much that remains mysterious: knowledge that was lost when the Old Kingdom collapsed, techniques that must be rediscovered or reinvented by each generation of builders. Your own mortuary temple, while impressive, will not rival the pyramids in scale. The age of pyramid building has largely passed, replaced by a preference for rock-cut tombs hidden in valleys and cliffs, protected by secrecy rather than by overwhelming mass. This shift reflects changing concerns about security, a recognition that even the most massive pyramid can be penetrated by determined thieves. That bulk alone is not enough to protect the precious contents of a royal burial. Your tomb in the Valley of the Kings represents this new philosophy: hidden, inaccessible, protected by the very barrenness and isolation of the location. But your mortuary temple will still be magnificent, a structure designed to impress and to endure. It will feature massive pylon gates, their sloping walls decorated with scenes of your military victories. It will include colonnaded courtyards where offerings will be made, hyper-style halls with painted ceilings depicting the journey of the sun through the sky, sanctuaries housing statues of yourself and the gods. The walls will be covered with relief carvings and inscriptions, your names and titles repeated endlessly, your deeds catalogued and celebrated, your divine nature proclaimed for all eternity. The construction of such a monument is more than just an expression of ego, though ego certainly plays a role. It is also a religious necessity, for the temple is the machine that will sustain your car in the afterlife. Each day, for as long as the temple stands and the priesthood functions, offerings will be made to your spirit: bread and beer, meat and wine, incense and flowers. These offerings, consecrated through ritual, will provide sustenance for your car, allowing it to continue existing, to maintain its identity and consciousness in the world beyond death. Without these offerings, your car would fade and dissipate, your identity would be lost, your eternal existence would fail. This is why you have endowed the temple with such vast resources, granting it agricultural estates that will produce the grain and livestock needed for the offerings, dedicating villages whose inhabitants will serve the temple in perpetuity, establishing a permanent priesthood whose sole function is to maintain your cult. You have tried to build redundancy into the system, to ensure that even if one source of support fails, others will remain. You have had legal documents drawn up specifying the obligations of your successors to maintain your temple and offerings. You have threatened divine retribution on anyone who neglects these duties or diverts these resources to other purposes. But you know in your heart that all these precautions may not be enough. You have seen the ruined temples of earlier pharaohs, the walls crumbling, the offerings long ceased, the names erased or usurped by later rulers. You know that memory is fragile, that even the most solemn obligations can be forgotten, that political and economic pressures can lead your successors to divert resources from your cult to more pressing needs. And so you are left with a kind of desperate hope, a belief that your monuments will endure, that your name will be remembered, that your car will be sustained, even as you recognize the uncertainty of it all. But as the temple rises, as the tomb deepens, you are increasingly aware of the passage of time. You are not as young as you once were. The years have taken their toll. Your body, once strong and vigorous, is beginning to show signs of age. Your joints ache in the morning. Your vision is not as sharp as it once was. You tire more easily, and the long hours of ritual and ceremony leave you exhausted. You know that you do not have forever, that the day is approaching when you will make your final journey to the west, when you will stand before Osiris and be judged, when your heart will be weighed and your fate determined. This knowledge fills you with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. Fear because you do not know what awaits you in the afterlife. Because despite all the rituals and preparations, despite all the spells and incantations, you cannot be certain that you will reach the field of reeds, that you will be judged worthy, that your soul will not be devoured by Ammit, the demon who waits in the hall of judgment. And anticipation, because you have spent your entire life preparing for this moment, because you have been taught since childhood that this is your true destiny, that the afterlife is the culmination of all your efforts, the reward for a life lived in service to Met. The years continue to pass, and your health begins to decline more noticeably. You develop a persistent cough that the physicians cannot cure, despite their herbs and potions, their incantations and amulets. Your appetite wanes, and you lose weight, your body growing thinner, frailer. The courtiers notice, of course. They whisper in the corridors, they exchange glances in the audience hall, they begin to maneuver, to position themselves for the succession. Your eldest son, the heir, is still young, not yet ready to rule, and there are factions who support other claimants, other sons, other relatives. The court is filled with tension, with the anticipation of change, with the scent of blood in the water. You do your best to maintain control, to project strength, to continue the rituals and ceremonies, but it becomes harder with each passing day. There are mornings when you cannot rise from your bed, when the pain is too great, when the exhaustion is overwhelming. On those days, the priests perform the temple rituals without you, and the people whisper that the gods are displeased, that Mat is weakening, that the kingdom is in danger. You hear these whispers, and they fill you with rage and despair. You have given your entire life to the gods, to the kingdom, to Mat. You have performed every ritual, made every offering, built every monument, and yet still, you are failing. Still your body is betraying you. Still death is approaching, inexorable and unstoppable. The physicians do what they can. They bleed you, they apply poultices, they recite spells, but you know that their efforts are futile. This is not a disease that can be cured, not a curse that can be lifted. This is simply the natural end of life, the fate that awaits all men, even pharaohs. And so you turn your attention to the one thing you can still control, your legacy. You summon the royal architect and order him to accelerate the work on your tomb and mortuary temple. You summon the high priest and instruct him to prepare the funerary texts, to ensure that every spell, every incantation, every ritual is perfect, that nothing is overlooked, that your journey to the afterlife will be as smooth and safe as possible. You also summon your eldest son, the heir, and you begin to instruct him in the duties of kingship. You teach him the rituals, the prayers, the protocols. You introduce him to the vizier, the treasurer, the commander of the army, the other officials who will serve him when you are gone. You take him to the temple and show him how to wake the god, how to perform the offerings, how to maintain Mat. He is young, but he is intelligent and eager to learn, and you see in him the potential to be a great pharaoh, perhaps even greater than you. This gives you some comfort, some sense that your life has not been in vain, that the kingdom will continue, that the dynasty will endure. But there is also a sense of melancholy, of regret. You think about all the things you have not done, all the campaigns you have not fought, all the monuments you have not built. You think about the rival kings who still threaten the borders, the rebellious governors who still defy your authority, the injustices that still exist in the land. You think about the personal moments you have missed, the time you have not spent with your children, the love you have not expressed to your wife, the friendships you have not cultivated. You have been Pharaoh, and that has consumed everything. And now at the end you wonder if it was worth it, if the crown and the crook and the flail were worth the sacrifice of your humanity. These thoughts come to you in the quiet hours of the night, when the pain keeps you awake, when you lie in your bed and stare at the painted ceiling, at the stars and gods depicted there, and you realize that you have no answer, that perhaps there is no answer, that this is simply the nature of kingship, the burden of being a living God. You have fulfilled your duty, you have maintained Ma'at, you have ruled the two lands, and that is all that can be asked of any pharaoh. The end comes in the heat of summer, during the season of harvest. You have been confined to your chambers for weeks, too weak to rise, too sick to attend the rituals. The physicians have given up, and the priests have begun the preparations for your death, the rituals that will ensure your safe passage to the afterlife. Your family gathers around your bed, your wife, your sons, your daughters, your brothers and sisters. They weep and pray, and you try to comfort them, to tell them that this is not an end but a beginning, that you will be reborn in the afterlife, that you will dwell in the field of reeds for all eternity. But your voice is weak, barely a whisper, and you are not sure they hear you. The high priest arrives, carrying the sacred texts, and he begins to recite the prayers for the dying. The words wash over you, ancient and familiar, and you feel a sense of peace, of acceptance. You have done everything you can. Your tomb is ready. Your mortuary temple is nearly complete. Your son is prepared to take the throne. There is nothing left to do but let go, to surrender to the journey that awaits. You close your eyes, and the world begins to fade. The voices around you grow distant, the light dims and you feel yourself slipping away, floating, drifting into darkness. And then suddenly, you are standing in a vast hall, a place of stone and shadow, lit by flickering torches. You are dressed in the finest linen, your body whole and strong, the pain and sickness gone. Before you stands a massive set of scales, and beside them the gods, Anubis with his jackal head, Thoth with his ibis beak, and Osiris on his throne, wrapped in white linen, his skin green like the fertile earth. You know where you are. This is the hall of judgment, the place where your heart will be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, where your fate will be determined. Anubis approaches and gestures for you to step forward. Your heart is removed from your chest, and it is placed on one side of the scales. On the other side, Thoth places the feather, light as air, the symbol of truth and justice. The scales tip back and forth, and you hold your breath, waiting, hoping, praying. Have you lived a just life? Have you maintained Ma'at? Have you been a good pharaoh, a good man? The scales settle, perfectly balanced, and a murmur runs through the hall. Your heart is equal to the feather. You have passed the test. Osiris rises from his throne and approaches you. He speaks, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the hall. He welcomes you to the afterlife, grants you passage to the field of reeds, promises you eternal life in paradise. You feel a surge of joy, of relief, of gratitude. You have made it. You have completed the journey. You are immortal. But then the vision fades, and you are back in your bed, in your chamber, surrounded by your family. The high priest is still reciting the prayers, and you realize that you are not yet dead, not yet in the afterlife. This was a vision, a glimpse of what is to come, a promise from the gods. You open your eyes one last time and look at the faces around you. Your wife is weeping, your son is holding your hand, and you try to smile, to reassure them. And then, with a final breath, you let go. The journey is complete. The life of Pharaoh is over. The eternity begins. Your body is taken immediately by the embalmers. They carry it to the house of embalming, a sacred place on the west bank of the Nile, where the process of mummification will begin. It is a process that will take 70 days, a sacred number, and it will involve the removal of your organs, the drying of your flesh with natron, the wrapping of your body in linen, the placement of amulets and charms to protect you in the afterlife. The embalmers work with skill and reverence, treating your body not as a corpse but as a vessel for your eternal soul, a temple that must be preserved forever. The embalmers are specialists, members of a priestly class who have learned their craft through years of apprenticeship. They work in a building that is part workshop, part temple, a place where the practical and the sacred merge. The chief embalmer wears a mask of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, transforming himself into the deity as he performs his duties. The first step in the process is the purification of the body. Your corpse is washed with water from the Nile and wine from the royal cellars, cleansing it of impurities. Then it is laid out on a slanted table, and the embalmers begin the most delicate and dangerous part of their work, the removal of the organs. A cut is made in your left side, just below the ribs, and through this opening, the embalmers reach inside and carefully extract the stomach, the intestines, the liver, and the lungs. Each organ is washed and treated with natron, then wrapped in linen and placed in one of 4 canopic jars, each jar protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus. The brain is removed through the nose, using long bronze hooks that are inserted through the nostrils to break up the brain tissue, which is then drawn out in pieces. This is a messy and unpleasant process, but it is necessary, for the brain, like the other soft tissues, will decay if left in place. The heart, however, is not removed. It is left in the chest, for the Egyptians believed that the heart is the seat of intelligence and emotion, the organ that will be weighed in the hall of judgment against the feather of Ma'at. To remove the heart would be to condemn the deceased to eternal oblivion, to rob them of their very identity. And so the heart remains, preserved along with the rest of the body, waiting for the moment when it will be tested and judged. Once the organs have been removed, your body is covered in natron, a naturally occurring salt that absorbs moisture. The natron is piled over and around the corpse, inside the body cavity, and on every external surface, creating a desiccating environment that will dry out the tissues over the next 40 days. During this time, the embalmers check the body regularly, replacing the natron as it becomes saturated with moisture, ensuring that the drying process is proceeding correctly. The room where this takes place is hot and dry, filled with the sharp mineral smell of the natron and the sweet cloying odor of decay that gradually fades as the body dries. After 40 days, the natron is removed, and the body, now completely desiccated, is washed again and treated with oils and resins to restore some flexibility to the skin and to seal it against further decay. The empty body cavity is stuffed with linen, sawdust, and aromatic spices, restoring the body's shape and preventing it from collapsing. Then begins the wrapping, the most time-consuming and ritualistic part of the process. Hundreds of yards of linen are required, cut into strips of varying widths. Each strip is anointed with resin as it is wrapped around the body, and between the layers, amulets and charms are placed at specific points. A scarab beetle over the heart, an eye of Horus on the chest, protective spells written on strips of papyrus tucked between the bandages. The wrapping takes days, each layer added with prayers and incantations, each turn of the cloth a ritual act. The embalmers work in a state of religious concentration, aware that they are preparing not just a body, but a vehicle for eternal life, a sacred object that will house your Kai and your Ba, the spiritual components of your being that will continue to exist after death. When the wrapping is complete, your body is encased in linen from head to toe, transformed into the iconic image of the mummy, anonymous and eternal. A final shroud is placed over the entire mummy, and your face is covered with a mask of gilded cartonnage, a material made from layers of linen or papyrus soaked in plaster, molded to resemble your features and covered in gold leaf. The mask is painted with your idealized image, your eyes lined with kohl, your headdress elaborate and regal, your expression serene and eternal. Meanwhile, the kingdom mourns. The news of your death spreads quickly, carried by messengers on horseback, by ships on the Nile, by word of mouth through the villages and towns. The people weep and wail, tearing their clothes, covering their heads with dust. The temples close, the markets shut down, and a period of official mourning is declared. Your son, the new Pharaoh, is crowned in a hasty ceremony, necessary to ensure the continuity of the state. But the full coronation will wait until after your funeral. The kingdom cannot be without a king, even for a day. As the 70 days pass, the preparations for your burial are completed. Your tomb in the Valley of the Kings is ready. The walls painted, the chambers filled with burial goods. Your sarcophagus has been carved and polished, the spells inscribed on its surface. Your mortuary temple on the west bank is finished. the statues in place, the altars prepared for the eternal offerings that will sustain your card. And on the final day, your mummified body is placed in a golden coffin and the funeral procession begins. It is a spectacle unlike any other. A procession that stretches for miles, involving thousands of people. At the front are the priests, chanting and burning incense. Behind them come the professional mourners, women hired to weep and wail, to express the grief that words cannot convey. Their cries fill the air, a rising and falling lament that echoes off the cliffs and across the river. Then comes your coffin, carried on a golden sledge, pulled by oxen, surrounded by your family, your officials, your guards. The sledge moves slowly, its runners scraping over the packed earth of the processional way, and every few hundred yards, it stops so that additional rituals can be performed, so that offerings can be made, so that the journey to the tomb can be marked by the proper ceremonies. Behind the sledge walks your son, the new Pharaoh, dressed in mourning garments, his face a mask of grief and duty. He is followed by your other sons and daughters, by your wives and concubines, by the nobles and officials of the court. And behind them, the people of Thebes, a vast crowd that follows the procession to the Valley of the Kings, to witness your final journey. The procession takes hours, winding through the streets of the city, across the river on boats, up the processional way that leads to the valley. The sun beats down, the dust rises in clouds, and the sound of chanting and weeping fills the air. The valley is a desolate place, a landscape of barren cliffs and windswept sand. But today it is transformed. The entrance to your tomb is decorated with flowers and offerings, and the priests stand ready to perform the final rituals. Your coffin is carried into the tomb, down the long corridors, past the painted walls, to the burial chamber. There it is placed inside the granite sarcophagus, and the lid is sealed. But before the tomb is closed, one final ceremony must be performed, the opening of the mouth. This is a ritual designed to restore your senses in the afterlife, to allow you to eat and drink, to speak and see. A priest, dressed as Anubis, touches your mummy's mouth with a ceremonial adze, reciting the spells that will animate your ka, that will allow your spiritual body to function in the world beyond death. And then, with final prayers and offerings, the priests withdraw, sealing the tomb behind them. Workers fill the corridors with rubble, blocking the passage to the burial chamber. The entrance is sealed with plaster and marked with your cartouche, your name, your identity preserved even as your physical presence is hidden from the world. Guards are posted to ensure that no tomb robbers can penetrate the valley, though you know, in your final moments of consciousness, that this protection will not last forever, that the lure of gold and treasure will eventually overcome even the most sacred prohibitions. But even as the tomb is sealed, even as the mourners disperse and the kingdom returns to normal, your story does not end. Your name is inscribed on the king lists, recorded in the annals of history. Your monuments stand as testaments to your reign. Your mortuary temple continues to receive offerings, and priests continue to recite your name, to perform the rituals that sustain your ka. And in the afterlife, you dwell in the field of reeds, a place of eternal peace and abundance, where the sun always shines, where the crops are always green, where you are forever young and strong, forever Pharaoh. Millennia pass, and the world changes beyond recognition. The dynasties rise and fall. The kingdoms fragment and reunite, and eventually, the civilization that you knew, the Egypt of the pharaohs, comes to an end. The temples are abandoned, the tombs are forgotten, and the desert sands reclaim the monuments. The knowledge of the hieroglyphs is lost, and your name, once spoken in prayers and offerings, fades into silence. The living gods become legends, and the legends become myths. Before that long decline, however, before the silence and the forgetting, your civilization represents one of the most remarkable achievements in human history. The Egypt of your time is not merely a kingdom of priests and pyramids, though those are certainly important. It is also a sophisticated culture with highly developed systems of writing, medicine, law, and administration. It is a society that has solved fundamental problems of organization and cooperation, that has created mechanisms for feeding large populations, for managing complex irrigation systems, for maintaining order over vast distances. The foundation of this civilization is writing. Egypt has developed not one but 3 writing systems. Hieroglyphs, the formal script used for religious texts and monumental inscriptions. Hieratic, a simplified cursive form used for everyday documents. and later Demotic, an even more abbreviated script. The hieroglyphic system is extraordinarily complex, with hundreds of signs representing sounds, concepts, and objects. Learning to read and write hieroglyphs takes years of training, and literacy is consequently limited to a small elite: the scribes, the priests, the officials who staff the bureaucracy. These scribes are the backbone of the Egyptian state, the men who make administration possible. They are trained in special schools attached to temples and government offices, where they spend years learning to form the intricate signs, to mix their inks from soot and red ochre, to prepare the papyrus sheets on which they will write. The training is rigorous and often harsh, with beatings for students who fail to master their lessons, but the rewards are substantial. A skilled scribe can rise to high office, can accumulate wealth and influence, can live a life of relative comfort compared to the farmers and laborers who make up the majority of the population. The texts these scribes produce are diverse and revealing. There are administrative documents, tax records and census data, grain accounts and labor rosters, the endless paperwork of a complex bureaucratic state. There are legal texts, contracts and wills, court proceedings and royal decrees. There are scientific texts, mathematical treatises, explaining how to calculate areas and volumes, medical papyri describing diseases and treatments, astronomical observations recording the movements of stars and planets. And there are literary texts, stories and poems, wisdom literature and hymns, the accumulated cultural heritage of a civilization that has existed for thousands of years. Egyptian medicine is particularly advanced for its time. A sophisticated system based on careful observation, practical experience, and a certain amount of magical thinking. The medical papyri describe hundreds of conditions and treatments, from the mundane to the exotic. There are prescriptions for digestive complaints, formulas for eye diseases, procedures for treating wounds and broken bones. The physicians understand the importance of cleanliness, use honey and other natural antimicrobials to prevent infection, know how to set fractures, and perform basic surgery. But Egyptian medicine also includes elements that seem strange to modern minds. Many treatments involve incantations and amulets alongside physical remedies, reflecting a worldview in which spiritual and material causes are deeply intertwined. Disease can be caused by natural factors like diet or injury, but it can also be caused by angry spirits or divine punishment, and treatment must address both physical and spiritual dimensions. The physician is thus part doctor and part priest, someone who can navigate both the material world of the body and the invisible world of spirits and gods. The legal system is similarly complex, a sophisticated framework for resolving disputes and maintaining order. Egypt has a well-developed concept of property rights, with detailed laws governing inheritance, contracts, and transactions. Court proceedings are recorded by scribes, with testimony from witnesses, presentation of evidence, and formal judgments rendered by appointed officials. The pharaoh is the ultimate source of justice, and in theory, any subject can appeal directly to him for a fair hearing, though in practice, most cases are handled by lower officials. Punishments for crimes vary depending on the severity of the offense and the status of the criminal. Minor infractions might be punished with fines or beatings. More serious crimes like theft or fraud might result in mutilation, cutting off the nose or ears of the criminal as a permanent mark of their transgression. The most serious crimes like murder or treason are punishable by death, though executions are relatively rare and usually reserved for the most egregious offenses. There is also a concept of collective responsibility, where family members might be punished for the crimes of one of their members, a practice designed to encourage families to police their own members and to discourage wrongdoing. The daily life of ordinary Egyptians, the farmers and craftsmen who make up the vast majority of the population, is far removed from the luxury and complexity of the royal court. These people live in simple mud-brick houses, typically consisting of a few small rooms arranged around a central courtyard. The houses have flat roofs where families sleep during the hot summer months, and small windows set high in the walls to provide ventilation while minimizing the heat of the sun. Furniture is minimal. A few stools or chairs, woven reed mats for sleeping, clay or wooden storage vessels for grain and other supplies. The diet of common Egyptians is simple but nutritious, based on bread and beer, supplemented with vegetables like onions, leeks, and lettuce, with occasional meat from fish, fowl, or livestock. Bread is the staple food, consumed at every meal, and it is made from emmer wheat or barley ground on stone querns. The coarse flour results in bread that is gritty and tough, and the wear on teeth is severe, a dental problem that affects Egyptians at all social levels. Beer is the universal beverage, a thick, nutritious drink brewed from partially baked bread, lower in alcohol content than modern beer, but safer to drink than Nile water, which can carry disease. Clothing is simple and practical, suited to the hot climate. Men typically wear loincloths or kilts made of linen, sometimes with a draped cloak for cooler weather or formal occasions. Women wear long linen dresses, often with straps over the shoulders, sometimes pleated or decorated with beads and embroidery. The wealthy have access to finer, softer linen and more elaborate designs, but the basic form is similar across social classes. Both men and women use cosmetics, kohl to line the eyes, providing not just beauty but also protection from the glare of the sun and from eye infections. Red ochre for lips and cheeks, perfumed oils and unguents for the hair and skin. Children in Egyptian society are cherished, seen as blessings from the gods, and as sources of labor and support for aging parents. Infant and child mortality is high, however, and families expect to lose several children before adulthood. Those who survive grow up learning the skills they will need for their adult roles. Boys learning their father's trade or working in the fields, girls learning to manage households, to spin and weave, to prepare food. Education is limited to the elite, to those training to become scribes or priests, but practical knowledge and cultural values are transmitted orally through stories and songs, through proverbs and practical demonstrations. Religion permeates every aspect of Egyptian life, not just the grand state rituals performed by Pharaoh and the high priests, but also domestic worship and personal piety. Common Egyptians maintain small shrines in their homes, where they make offerings to household gods and to deceased ancestors. They wear amulets for protection, consult with local priests or wise women about problems and misfortunes, participate in local festivals celebrating the gods of their particular region. The religious landscape is incredibly diverse, with hundreds of gods and goddesses, some worshipped throughout Egypt, others venerated only in specific localities. This diversity reflects Egypt's long history and its regional variations. The country has been unified for centuries, but it was originally two separate kingdoms, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north, and even after unification, regional identities and traditions remain strong. Each nome, each administrative district, has its own patron deity, its own festivals and customs. The great gods like Re and Amun and Osiris are known everywhere, but they coexist with countless local deities, minor gods of fields and rivers, protective spirits of homes and workshops. The Egyptian conception of time is cyclical rather than linear. The year repeats in an endless pattern of flood, growth and harvest. The day repeats as the sun god sails across the sky and through the underworld. Kings rise and fall, but the institution of kingship remains eternal. This cyclical view creates a profound conservatism, a reverence for tradition and precedent, a belief that the old ways are best because they have been proven over countless generations. Innovation happens, of course, but it is usually incremental, disguised as restoration or the recovery of ancient knowledge rather than acknowledged as something new. This cultural conservatism has both strengths and weaknesses. It creates stability, allowing Egyptian civilization to endure for 3,000 years with remarkable continuity in language, religion, and social organization. But it also creates rigidity, making it difficult for Egypt to adapt when faced with radically new circumstances, when the old solutions no longer work and fundamentally new approaches are needed. The conservatism that has sustained Egypt for millennia will eventually contribute to its decline, as the kingdom proves unable to adapt to a changing world, to new military technologies, to new forms of political organization, to new empires rising in the east and west. But you are not truly gone. Your tomb, hidden deep in the Valley of the Kings, remains sealed, protected by the rock and the sand, by the dryness of the desert air. Your mummified body lies undisturbed, wrapped in linen, your face covered with a golden mask, your hands crossed over your chest, holding the crook and flail. And around you, the burial goods, the shabti figures, the furniture and jewelry, all wait in the darkness, ready to serve you in the afterlife that you believed would last forever. And then, thousands of years after your death, the tomb is discovered. Archaeologists, armed with shovels and brushes, with cameras and notebooks, break through the seal and descend into the darkness. They find the corridors, the chambers, the sarcophagus, They find your mummy, still wrapped, still adorned, still remarkably preserved. And they find the burial goods, the treasures of gold and precious stones, the evidence of a civilization that once ruled the world. Your tomb becomes one of the most famous archaeological discoveries of all time, and your name, forgotten for millennia, is spoken again, this time in a language you would not recognize, by people you would not understand. The discovery of royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings represents one of the great triumphs of modern archaeology, a field that emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries as Europeans became fascinated with ancient Egypt. Early excavations were often little better than treasure hunting, with artifacts removed from their context and scattered among private collections and museums around the world. But gradually a more scientific approach developed, with careful documentation of finds, preservation of context, concern for conservation and ethical treatment of human remains. The most famous of all discoveries was the tomb of Tutankhamun, found nearly intact in 1922 by Howard Carter. Though Tutankhamun was a minor pharaoh who died young and accomplished little during his brief reign, his tomb survived largely unplundered, and the treasures it contained gave the world an unprecedented glimpse into the wealth and sophistication of ancient Egyptian royal burials. The golden mask that covered his mummy became one of the most iconic images in the world, a symbol of the mystery and allure of ancient Egypt. Your own tomb, if you are one of the more famous pharaohs, might have been discovered earlier, perhaps in the 19th century, when excavation techniques were less refined. The condition of your mummy and the survival of your burial goods would depend on many factors, whether the tomb was robbed in antiquity, whether it was exposed to moisture or extreme temperature variations, whether later inhabitants of Egypt reused the tomb for other burials or storage. Some royal mummies are remarkably well preserved, their features still recognizable, their skin dried but intact. Others are in poor condition, damaged by ancient tomb robbers or by the ravages of time. The study of your mummy reveals intimate details about your life and death. X-rays show the condition of your bones, evidence of arthritis or other degenerative conditions, signs of injuries or diseases. CT scans provide even more detailed information, allowing researchers to examine internal structures without unwrapping the mummy and damaging the preservation. DNA analysis can establish family relationships, confirming or challenging the genealogies recorded in ancient texts. Isotope analysis of your teeth and bones can reveal information about your diet, about where you spent your childhood, about how your nutrition changed over the course of your life. These scientific studies paint a picture of pharaohs who were human after all, who suffered from the same ailments that affected their subjects: dental problems from gritty bread, arthritis from age, infectious diseases, injuries from warfare or accidents. Some pharaohs died young, in their 20s or 30s, cut down by disease or violence before they could fully mature. Others lived into their 50s or 60s, a respectable age for the time, ruling for decades and leaving their mark on history. A few even reached their 70s or 80s, defying the odds in an era when life expectancy was much shorter than in the modern world. The artifacts from your tomb, the objects that surrounded you in death, tell their own story. The furniture shows the skill of Egyptian craftsmen, their mastery of joinery and decoration, their use of precious materials like ivory and ebony, gold and silver. The jewelry reveals sophisticated techniques of metalworking, of stone cutting and polishing, of inlay and granulation. The texts inscribed on the tomb walls and on the burial goods preserve the religious beliefs of your time, the spells and prayers that were meant to protect you and guide you to the afterlife. Museums around the world now house these treasures, displaying them behind glass for millions of visitors to see. Your mummy might rest in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, in a climate-controlled case designed to slow further deterioration. Or perhaps it has been returned to the Valley of the Kings, reinterred in your original tomb after study, allowed to rest as you intended. Your burial goods might be scattered across continents, in the British Museum in London, the Louvre in Paris, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, the result of 19th-century excavations that saw artifacts as prizes to be claimed rather than as heritage to be preserved in place. This dispersal troubles modern Egyptians, who view these objects as part of their national heritage, stolen or acquired under questionable circumstances during the colonial era. There are ongoing debates about repatriation, about whether these artifacts should be returned to Egypt or remain in the museums where they have been studied and displayed for generations. These debates reflect changing attitudes about colonialism, about cultural property, about who has the right to tell the story of ancient Egypt and to control access to its material remains. But regardless of where they reside, these objects and the stories they tell continue to fascinate people around the world. Ancient Egypt has captured the popular imagination like few other ancient civilizations, inspiring countless books and films, shaping aesthetic movements, influencing architecture and design. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb sparked an Egyptomania in the 1920s that influenced fashion, jewelry, architecture, and popular culture. This fascination has never entirely faded, renewed by each new discovery, by advances in technology that reveal new information about ancient Egyptian life, by the enduring appeal of a civilization that seems both alien and somehow relatable. What is it about ancient Egypt that continues to captivate us? Perhaps it is the sheer antiquity of the civilization, the fact that the pyramids were already ancient when Rome was founded, that Egyptian culture endured for longer than the entire span of Western civilization from the classical Greeks to the present day. Perhaps it is the grandeur of the monuments, the ambition of builders who created structures designed to last forever and largely succeeded. Perhaps it is the mystery, the sense that despite all we have learned, much remains unknown, that the ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge and achieved things that we still struggle to fully understand. Or perhaps it is the concept of the pharaoh itself, the idea of the god-king, the living deity who bridged heaven and earth, who wielded absolute power, but also bore absolute responsibility. In an age of democracy and human rights, when divine kingship seems an archaic and oppressive concept, there is still something compelling about the figure of the pharaoh, about the symbolism of the double crown and the crook and flail, about the performance of kingship as a cosmic necessity rather than merely a political office. They study your body, your bones, your teeth. They use modern science to learn about your life, your health, your diet. They X-ray your mummy and discover that you suffered from arthritis, that you had dental problems, that you died in your 50s, relatively young by modern standards, but old for the time. They examine the burial goods and learn about the wealth and sophistication of your civilization. They translate the hieroglyphs on the tomb walls and read the spells and incantations that were meant to guide you to the afterlife. And they marvel at the scale of your ambition, the depth of your faith, the complexity of your worldview. Your mummy is placed in a museum, behind glass, where millions of people come to see you, to gaze at your face, to wonder about your life. And in a strange way you have achieved the immortality you sought. Not in the field of reeds, not in the paradise of the afterlife, but here, in the world of the living, where your name is known, where your story is told, where your legacy endures. You are Pharaoh, the living god, the ruler of the two lands, and though your kingdom has fallen, though your civilization has ended, you remain, a testament to the power of human ambition, the strength of human belief, the enduring fascination with the past. And so our journey through the life of a pharaoh comes to an end. We have walked through the golden halls of palaces, long since turned to dust. We have stood in the shadow of monuments built to last forever. We have felt the weight of the double crown and the burden of divine responsibility. We have witnessed the rituals that maintained the cosmic order, the battles that expanded the empire, the preparations for the eternal life that awaited beyond death. We have seen the glory and the loneliness, the power and the fear, the humanity beneath the mask of divinity. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were many things: kings and priests, warriors and builders, politicians and gods. They ruled with absolute authority, but they were also bound by tradition, by ritual, by the expectations of their people and their gods. They lived lives of unimaginable luxury, but they also carried burdens that would crush ordinary men. And they were obsessed, above all else, with the idea of eternity, with the belief that death was not an end but a beginning, that the body could be preserved and the soul could live forever in a paradise beyond the reach of time. That belief drove them to create some of the most remarkable achievements in human history: the pyramids of Giza, the temples of Karnak and Luxor, the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. These monuments stand today as testaments to their vision, their skill, their determination, and they remind us that even in a world so different from our own, even in a time so distant that it seems almost mythical, people dreamed of transcending the limits of mortality, of leaving a mark on the world that would endure long after they were gone. The pharaohs achieved that immortality, though perhaps not in the way they expected. They are remembered not as gods but as men, Men who lived and ruled and died. Men whose stories have become part of the great tapestry of human history. And their legacy is not just in the monuments they built or the kingdoms they ruled, but in the example they set, the idea that a single individual, through vision and will and effort, can shape the course of history, can create something that lasts beyond their own brief existence. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. The story fades now, but the echoes of that ancient world remain, carved in stone, written in hieroglyphs, preserved in the dry sands of Egypt. Until next time, rest well, and dream of distant ages, of golden crowns and eternal kingdoms, of the timeless desert where the pharaohs once ruled as living gods. Sleep peacefully, and may your own journey be blessed with the same hope for eternity that guided those ancient kings. Good night.